Greetings, Vammers. How are you all doing? Well, it's been a 1-year anniversary since the release of The Last Joke, The Last Jest, The Last Betrayal, The Last Bloody Jedi. I make no secret that I absolutely detest this movie. It took me a little while, but I finally decided to put this at my number 1 of my bottom 10 films. Technically it's bottom 11, since 2 tie for second place. They are Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 1 and Garbage Pail Kids. Yes, I put The Last Jedi below the abomination of cinema. Why? Because The Last Jedi had no right to be this stupid, to be this disrespectful, and just overall boring. Many great YouTubers have criticized this thing to death. Mauler, Vita Gasoldi, BanditIncorporated, Robothead, and of course, Geeks and Gamers. Maybe one day I'll review this movie, but otherwise, the best review I would recommend would be the one done by the Dishonored Wolf. He is way too spot on about that movie, and I practically share his view entirely. Seriously, you just put in The Last Jedi on YouTube, and it's scathing review after scathing review after scathing analysis after scathing review. Overall, very few people have actually said that they like this movie. And don't get me wrong, it's not like they're scared to share their views. If anything, we're now in the day and age where people aren't allowed to hate bad Star Wars movies. Yeah, think about it. You had the obnoxious minority saying that if you like the prequels, you were an idiot in some respect. Now, when it comes to people defending this movie, they're not very good defenses, because they're very easily debunked. Robothead goes into better detail on that. And again, no disrespect to the people who like the movie, but you can't help but feel like that it was trying to be manipulative and it was just so arrogant. But then again, the mindset of this creative team was so very proud of the t-shirt, "The Force is Female." God, that is just so dumb. And I know there's a Force is Male shirt out there to try and counter that. It's just as dumb. What's not dumb is the Force is everyone, or the Force is everything, because the Force is actually both. In fact, Epic Geekery are doing t-shirts based on those terms. I'll put a link in the description down below so you can get one for yourself. I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm going to get one, and I will wear it proudly. But now, with that said, there is one thing I've noticed about this series, particularly about The Last Jedi, a question that's not asked that often. And believe me, I've looked. Is there a way that this movie could have been brilliant? And I mean found brilliant by the general audience, the Star Wars fans, and sci-fi lovers in general. Is there a way that this movie could have been written that everyone could have loved it? My answer? Yes. Yes, you could have. But obviously, you would need to do a lot of rewriting, a lot of planning. Something which this series seems to very much lack. I'm just going to go into a little bit of history now, but if you want to begin on where I intend to rewrite The Last Jedi, go to this timestamp. Let me tell you the single biggest mistake that Disney has made, that Lucasfilm has made when it comes to Star Wars currently. By completely tossing out the expanded universe and just barely using. Metaphorical question for you. If you had a gold mine, and you went to so many parts of that gold mine and got nothing but gold, what would you do with it? You would use it, wouldn't you? So then why would you not only go back to that gold mine, try and find more gold where there was gold, only to find that you'll only get copper, and then just paint it a gold color, pretend that it's gold, while then throwing out the gold that was already dug up and that was given to you when you took over the gold mine freely? Because from what I've seen, that's what this sequel series has done. The Thrawn trilogy, which Lucas said himself was canon. Why would you not keep that in somehow? That's actually the book trilogy, the number one reason why Star Wars was heavily revitalized in the 90s. Not to say that Star Wars was dead or dying or just unpopular. But the early 90s, with some of the video games, but particularly the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn, Star Wars just got this new breath, this new pulse. And it was actually going in a very good direction. And yes, the prequels came along, but in between that, we got some very good video games, a couple of which were canon. Dark Forces, anyone? And also, one of my all-time favorite books, not just of Star Wars, but just of fiction in general. Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire. This is not only one of my favorite books in all of Star Wars, but one of my all-time favorite books in general. Steve Perry's novel of Shadows of the Empire, the more you read it, the more you wish it became a movie. It was the perfect in-between story of The Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi. And that's when it gave us this great character known as Dash Rendar. I've yet to find a Star Wars fan who doesn't know of Dash Rendar. Which brings me back to the Thrawn trilogy. I've yet to hear of a Star Wars fan who didn't know of Mara Jade, and especially Grand Admiral Thrawn. Oh god, Grand Admiral Thrawn was incredible. And Dave Filoni, thank you for using him in Star Wars Rebels. Now, just an interesting side note. Grand Admiral Thrawn was actually one of the most requested characters to be a mainstay, not just make an appearance or have a reference, but be a mainstay in the Star Wars movies, along with Mara Jade, Ahsoka Tano, Kyle Katarn, and Dash Rendar. Yeah, last time I checked, those were the 5 most requested characters to be in the movies. There were others, of course, like Kip Duron, Kirana T, all of Luke Skywalker's students in some respect. Somewhere around there on the internet, those forums are still active. Ones that said, which characters do you want to see appear in the Star Wars movies the most? As well as a couple of older YouTube videos. I'm actually struggling to find them, and I don't know if it's because they were removed, or if time went that far back, but either way, it's driving me crazy. And if anyone can find some of those videos about top 10 characters, or top 5 Star Wars characters who should be mainstays in the new sequels, I would very much appreciate that. My question is why? Why would you not use these characters? You didn't need to bring in these new characters. You didn't need to try and say, oh, we want to bring in more strong, fierce, independent women. You already had 2 that were perfectly well written. Well, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear Vammers, let's rewrite The Last Jedi. First, a basic story overview. The Last Jedi, in this version, will be a detective story. There could be 2 major mysteries, the main focus being on Rey's lineage, because let's face it, that was a bit of a big thing that was supposed to happen, and a subtle focus being Snoke's origin, which leads to a 3rd large mystery, the secret behind the First Order's power. And of course, the word Jedi is both singular and plural. So it could literally mean something like the last 50 of them. Last of the old, with Rey being one of the first of the new. Arguably the first of the new. Now in terms of the plot, the main focus will be Rey becoming part of the new Jedi Academy and learning the ways of the Force, while interacting with the students, the masters, etc. The side plots will follow Finn, Poe, Leia, Chewbacca, but here we also not only bring back Lando Calrissian, but perhaps we bring in Dash Rendar. Their stories will involve space combat, detectivery, gathering intel for the Alliance, and Resistance. I'm sorry, that is still so stupid to me. But unlike the previous Star Wars movies, this movie will actually take place in the span of an unspecified amount of time. Okay, The Empire Strikes Back did do that as well, but here we actually show that large amount of allotted time has passed, anywhere between 6 months to maybe even 2 years. And not only do we bring in Dash Rendar, but we bring in many other characters from the original expanded universe. You know what? Here's a fun little round. Casting time. Though if you're not interested in this round, I recommend skipping to this timestamp to continue on with the story. First up, Dash Rendar. My original pick was actually John Saigon, who voiced him and also kind of looks like him. Well, his original artwork, that is. Sadly, he passed away last year from cancer. Not fair, he was a great actor. Other picks would have been Andrew Jackson, Robert Patrick, Stephen Lang, or James Remar. One character who is a must, Mara Jade Skywalker. Yeah, for a creative group who are so intent on bringing in strong female characters, you would think that this character would have been a no-brainer. Mara Jade has an incredible backstory, an incredible character arc, and I will not dare spoil it for you. Just read the Thrawn trilogy, play Mysteries of the Sith, just look up Mara Jade. You're welcome. As to who I would pick, one of my favorites is the ever so youthful, ever so charming, ever so tough Kim Basinger. Other choices would include Christine Sutherland, Christine Baranski, Linda Hamilton, Michelle Fairley, Linda Boyd, or another one of my favorites, Dana Delaney, Lois Lane from Superman the Animated Series, and Andrea from Batman Mask of the Phantasm. In this story, I would also bring in Kip Duron, one of Luke Skywalker's first students. For him, I would pick Pedro Pascal. Because he's too friggin' cool, okay? Kirana T, another one of Luke's students who's now a Jedi Master. Zoe Saldana is one of my first choices. Streen, Luke's oldest student, in terms of age. A man who is able to manipulate the weather to he's basically Star Wars answer to Storm from X-Men, okay? And Charles Dance would be a perfect choice for him. Tion Solisar, who is the chronicler of Luke's Jedi Academy. Lena Headey I'd pick for her. I just noticed I'm picking a fair few Game of Thrones actors. Oh well, who cares? They're good actors. Kyle Katarn? Yes. Why would I not have Kyle Katarn in here somehow? Kurt Russell, David Hayter, or Jason Cord himself, who originally portrayed his live-action version in the video games Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight. He could do it. That is, if he's interested. Corin Horn. Now there's an interesting character, who has some very interesting force power. I would pick Rob Paulson for him. Cam Solusar, the husband of Tion Solusar, and a pretty strong Jedi as well, Kevin Conroy. Because come on, Mark Hamill, Kevin Conroy on screen together, tell me that's not awesome. Octo Ramis, Luke's youngest Jedi Council member. Because yeah, these characters also end up being part of the new Jedi Council. I would pick Laura Bailey. Yes, I know a couple of these people are more into voice work than they are screen work, but that doesn't mean they can't do screen work. I would also bring in some more obscure choices. One like Ace Azamine, the never-seen lead character from X-Wing Alliance, who some people cite as the greatest Star Wars game ever done. Yeah, it's possible. At least the best in terms of flight simulators. It had a great story, had some fantastic gameplay, and a fantastic use of John Williams' score. Get it on Steam. You're welcome. Also get a joystick. There are other characters I want to bring in, but I'll save that for later. Now, also, I've given myself a little bit of a challenge here. Holdo and Rose Tico. I hate those characters like you wouldn't believe. I actually forgive Jar Jar Binks because of just Holdo alone. But is there a way how those two characters can be awesome? Well, keep listening and we'll see. Now, where the story begins, actually it's a little similar to how The Last Jedi actually opens, where the Resistance is evacuating from their home base, or at least this particular base, with Leia, with Poe, with all the crew. However, they leave before the First Order gets there. Well, after all, Starkiller Base did try to destroy them, so they'd be dumb to stay there. However, they're not just escaping, they're regrouping, they're meeting up with the rest of the military. Yes, we saw civilian planets get destroyed, but we did not see military targets. They wanted to take down the Republic. But the First Order did not hit any military targets at all, did they? And you know, since this is the mighty Galactic Alliance, because really that's what they should be called, sorry Toy Story, you would think there would be more to this resistance than one super ship and a couple of frigates and a couple of starfighter squadrons, wouldn't you? It's just more logical that way. So they escape, seconds before the First Order arrives. And when that Star Dreadnought attacks the empty base, that triggers a super cannon near the base to fire a super torpedo back at the Dreadnought, causing it some serious damage. Hey ho, way to go Akbar. General Hux is on board the Dreadnought, and you would expect him to be royally unamused, to say the least. Then we cut back to Acta. Rey is giving Luke his father's lightsaber. Luke takes it and he accepts it with gratitude. He also asks how she found him. Rey then tells Luke everything, and then tells him about Han Solo. Luke then replies, "Yes, I know. I felt his death in the Force. And that's why he was up there standing alone. He was mourning his friend. He just wanted to be away from the Jedi Temple for a moment." Then Rey tells Luke about her experience with the Force, and how she felt the Force literally tell her what needed to be done and how to do things. Luke looked at her curiously. Luke asks her, does she even know what the Force is at all? Rey then responds, "No idea." See, comedy that's not forced. Though before Luke could say anything else, Chewbacca and R2-D2 approach him and Rey. You know, I don't need to say any more than that. Let that just be a heartfelt reunion. It writes itself. After the reunion, Chewbacca asks where his students are, where the temple is. Luke then turns around and does a Moses, meaning that he parts the water with the Force to show a hidden underground temple, which, from the looks of it, is nothing but ruins. Rey comments how it really doesn't look like much, and there Luke simply says to her, "Your eyes can deceive you, don't trust them." Hey-oh! Via secret elevator, Luke takes them to the temple, which is hidden underwater, but it doesn't look like it's ruins anymore. It actually looks like a mighty, powerful, somewhat modern-day temple. When they enter, they see other Jedi students training with other Jedi Masters. And they are first greeted by none other than Mara Jade Skywalker. She's happy to see Chewbacca, of course. And she's worried about Luke, because she too felt Han's death in the Force. She curiously looks at Rey, who, of course, is just bewildered by everything. When Mara asks who she is, that's when Luke explains her side of the story. Mara isn't quite sure what to make of it. So that's when Mara decides that Rey should be brought before the Jedi Council. Before Rey is taken anywhere, though, 4 Jedi approach them. They're younger, and in fact, 3 of them actually look similar to Luke and Mara in a way. One of them, who's the eldest, simply says, "Are you all right, Father?" Obviously, this is his son. To which Luke responds, "I will be fine, Anakin." That's right. Luke and Mara have 3 kids. In the original expanded universe, it was Han and Leia who had 3 kids. Twins named Jaina and Jason, and a third one named Anakin. They also stayed on as husband and wife after that, so to whoever thought it was a good idea to break them up for whatever reason, your reason's not good enough. And we're sick of seeing couples break up off screen. Or in general, when they never should have broken up. It's dumb. Stop that! But I digress. In this version, Luke and Leia have 3 kids, but their 4th child, I'll get to her in a moment, and yes, it's a her. The eldest one is named Anakin, in honor of his grandfather. And I'm just going to say it, Sebastian Stan, because it is just scary how similar he and Mark Hamill look. As for the second son, I imagined him to be a little bit more of a beast. Taller than the average Skywalker, who range between 5'9" and 6'1". This guy I'm expecting to be around the 6'5" mark, and have a voice that is similar to James Earl Jones, both in terms of timbre and speech pattern. I can kinda meet the criteria, just saying. But the guy I envisioned for this character is Armie Hammer. He's got the right height, he's got the right voice, and he kinda looks like a mix of Mark Hamill and Hayden Christensen. So I think it's a good match. And judging by his size, yes, he's basically the physical mighty warrior of this group. Then the third one, the youngest child of Luke and Mara, let's make her a girl. As to who should be her, new actress time. Think of a mixture of Mark Hamill and any of those actresses I've mentioned before. She's well versed in lightsaber combat, but her main strength is the Force. Basically throwing rocks, using a light side version of Force lightning, that sort of thing. The name I'm giving her is Nyssa Padme Skywalker. In terms of these characters' personalities, Anakin is a little bit more well-reserved. You always have this sense that he was wiser beyond his years, though there are times where he could lack a bit of foresight. Anakin, however, has a little bit more bravado, a little bit more macho. He's very confident, but he's not necessarily egotistical. He knows his limits, but he also knows exactly what he can do. And in terms of lightsaber combat, well, very few can actually match him. And Nyssa is perhaps a little bit more on the energetic side. She's the bubbly one. She's the cute little darling princess. But remember how I mentioned that there was a fourth one? This one is Jaina. Jaina Solo. May as well at least take one from the expanded universe. She's the younger sister of Ben Solo. She's a bit of a cynic like her dad, but has the good heart of both her mother and father. However, she's a little bit more, well, cynical, to put it kindly, than anyone else there, because after all, she would have just felt her father die in the Force as well. So needless to say, she's not quite that happy. Rey actually notices this and asks her if she's alright. Jaina looks up at Rey, and she said that she will be fine. She also said that she's happy to see Luke again and walks off. Rey is confused by this, but then Luke briefly explains to her that Han was her father. Then, of course, Rey feels quite sad about that, as one would expect. We cut back to the Resistance. You know what? Maybe now we can start calling it the Alliance, because this is where Leia meets up with a good, huge chunk of the Alliance military. There she meets up with some of the great legends like Mon Mothma, as well as Ace Asamine, who is now one of the great generals of the Alliance. And of course, one of the head honchos, in his own Star Defender, that's what some of these supercruisers are called, good old Lando Calrissian himself. And with him is the legendary, thought to be long dead Dash Rendar. They board what's called a Superstar Defender. It's basically the Alliance's answer to Superstar Destroyers. Hell, it could be an answer to the Mega Star Destroyer. Leia debriefs everybody, first saying how Starkiller Base was destroyed. Of course, everyone cheers about that. Lando then places a hand on her shoulder and asks where Han is. Leia, with a heavy heart, responds that Han sacrificed himself in order for Starkiller Base to be destroyed. Lando and Dash are devastated by the news. After a moment of sorrow, Lando frowns and simply says, "We will mourn later, and we will avenge him now." So you see, Lando is still the very classy ladies' man that we all know and love, but during his time with the Alliance he's become quite a war general indeed. Dash simply nods his head, turns around to Leia, and says to her, "One thing that we're doing right now is trying to find the First Order's home base. If it wasn't Starkiller Base, then it must be somewhere else, especially considering the fact that out of nowhere, they have a military force which is on par with the Galactic Empire." Ace Asamine then pipes up saying, "Through the Bothan network, we've been spying on them, but they have very clever codes. But one thing that's always constant about it is that they mention this thing simply known as SF. Dash says, "Well, of course, we have no idea what the hell that means. But it's something that we're going to find out because they talk about it a lot and it seems very damn important." Another man walks in. Wedge Antilles. You know, I would hope Dennis Lawson would return for the role if that was ever to happen. Just saying. He walks up to Leia and asks her what the next course of action should be. Leia simply responds with one word: reconnaissance. All the surrounding generals simply say, "Our specialty." Wedge then walks up to a panel, contacts Poe, and orders him to search in parts of the Outer Rim. First place to look is none other than Tatooine. We cut to Poe, who is in the medbay of one of the ships, and he acknowledges the order. He then looks to Finn, who is still recovering. He promises him that he will come back, and he walks out the door. We then cut back to the Jedi Academy. Rey walks into the chambers of what appears to be the new Jedi Council. Of course, it's headed by Luke Skywalker. Around him are Mara Jade, Kip Duron, Kirana T, Streen, Tion Solusar, Kyle Katarn, Corran Horn, Octoramus, and Cam Solusar. She asks why she was brought here, to which Kip Duron responds, "Because we want to offer you training." Rey is shocked by this, and asks them why. They don't know her. For all they know, she could actually even be a First Order spy. Kyle Katarn strokes his beard and says, "Well, now you've gotten us thinking about that." Rey looks at Kyle with a hint of fear on her face. But it's not a fear of being discovered, obviously, it's a fear of being cast out. Katarn simply responds, "Relax, kid, we know you're not the type." Streen is the one to speak up, saying, "The light side of the Force practically blazes within you. It shines within you. You need to learn how to keep that hidden if you want to be able to sneak by the Sith." Rey looks at him puzzled and asks, "The Sith?" Kirana T is then the one to speak. The Sith are the opposite of the Jedi. They immerse themselves with the Force to the point where they become unnatural, evil entities. Tion then speaks up saying that throughout history the Jedi and Sith have constantly been at war in one way or another. There was a period that they were gone for 1,000 years. Rey then asks, when did the Sith return? How long ago was it? Cam Solusar answers with, they subtly came back roughly the same time Anakin was born. Rey gives Cam an incredulous look and says, "You mean Luke's son? But they must have been around longer than 30 years. Cam responds, "They were. I'm talking about Anakin the First." Corran Horn then speaks up. This Anakin was Luke's father. He was a good man, a great Jedi Knight, arguably the most powerful Jedi that ever existed. Octoramus is the one to speak next. It was a great tragedy what happened to Anakin. Darth Sidious was the one who seduced him to the dark side. Though one thing that actually contributed to it was a Jedi Council that was somewhat arrogant. Kip Duron then speaks up. One thing that the Jedi banned were romantic relationships, because of a fear of jealousy and envy turning one down the dark path. Though we understand why some Jedi Masters thought that, there were some other Jedi Masters who had a little bit more insight and wisdom to it. That it wasn't love in itself or another sentient that causes you to fall, but the wrong kind of passion. Sadly, few Jedi had that sort of insight at the time. Rey simply stares. Obviously she took it all in, but then she simply asks, "Why are you telling me this?" Mara then responds, "To help you understand that we strive to have no arrogance, unlike what you would have experienced with Kylo Ren." Rey looks down in deep thought. Then Luke leans in on his knees and says to her, "And we're going to offer you training. We will all help you become a Jedi. That is, if you choose to." Rey looks up, with a smile barely containing her excitement, and says, "I accept your offer." Luke smiles and leans back on his chair. Rey looks down for a moment, and then looks at Luke and asks him, "You mentioned how the Jedi are of the light and the Sith are of the dark. Is there one in the middle?" Some of the council members laugh, which confuses Rey a little bit. She asks, "Did I say something funny?" Luke responds, "No, you just asked a very well-timed question. I was going to advise you to seek my son Anakin. He will not only show you to one of our spare quarters, but he's the perfect person to ask that question." Rey's confused for a moment, smiles, then leaves. Obviously, she is quite excited and barely able to contain herself. Shortly in one of the larger halls, she finds Anakin, who is training other Jedi Knights. Anakin notices her and smiles, and beckons her to come over. He asks her, "So you've decided to join us?" Rey nods enthusiastically and then practically blurts out asking, "What's the one in the middle?" Anakin jolts, shakes his head and looks at her. "What?" is all he can say. Rey's smile disappears and she starts blushing furiously out of embarrassment. Then she looks down, holding her hands together, and asks quietly, "What's the one in the middle of the Jedi and the Sith?" Zenekin pauses for a moment, and then his eyes light up when he realizes. "The Bendu," he responds. Also aptly known as the Grey Jedi, and arguably the original Jedi. I take it my father wanted you to ask me that question. Rey just looks up at him and nods. Zenekin continues. I was fortunate enough to get training from a Bendu sage and a Bendu monk. I will tell you about it sometime. For now, let me give you a tour of the temple, and then I will take you to your new quarters, your new home. Zenekin and Rey walk off together outside of the hall. And now we have come to the end of part 1. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed my rewrite of The Last Jedi. I've been thinking about this long and hard. I kinda have to, in order to not think about the actual Last Jedi, a movie which I hate so much that I almost get post-traumatic stress disorder flashbacks whenever I think about it. Also, the video would have gone on way too long, and I know you don't have enough time in the day. Expect part 2 to be released just a little bit after the new year. In the meantime, remember, the Force is everyone. The Force is everything. Choose your shirt. It could be the perfect gift for the true Star Wars fan. Thank you for listening, Vammers. I'm David J.G. Doyle, signing off and thanking you. And just in case you don't hear from me before then, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.